When a storm batters Larkspur Ridge, 3 lives collide on Josie Mercer's doorstep. But will the storm's end bring a new beginning, or more heartbreak? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from. Today, the rain came down in wild sheets over Larkspur Ridge, thunder crashing like God's own fury. But inside her tiny homestead, Josie Mercer was used to storms, both the kind that roared through the hills and the ones that had shaped her heart. Josie sat by the window, a worn quilt wrapped around her shoulders. The lantern light cast shadows across the small living room as she watched the rain pound against the glass. 2 years a widow, she'd grown accustomed to the silence, broken only by the occasional cluck of her chickens or the howl of the wind through the valley. Just another night, she whispered to herself, running her fingers over the simple gold band she still wore. Tom had been gone 2 years now, lost to the gold fever that sent men scrambling into mountains never to return. What he'd left behind were dreams, debts, and a young wife who'd learned the hard way that love wasn't always enough. Lightning flashed, illuminating the room in harsh white light. Josie jumped at the sudden crack of thunder that followed. Then she heard something that didn't belong to the storm. A knock. Josie frowned. Nobody in their right mind would be out in weather like this, especially not to visit a widow who lived a good mile from the nearest neighbor. The knock came again, more urgent this time. Josie set down her mending and crossed to the door, grabbing the shotgun that stood in the corner. Tom had taught her how to use it at least. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice steady despite the nervous flutter in her chest. No answer came, just the howling of the wind. Josie hesitated, then unbolted the door and pulled it open, keeping the shotgun close. There was nobody there, but as she looked down, her heart nearly stopped. A basket sat on her porch, rain soaking through the thin blanket that covered something inside. That something moved. And then came a cry, thin and reedy at first, then growing stronger. A baby. Good Lord, Josie gasped, setting the shotgun against the wall and kneeling down. She pulled back the wet blanket to reveal a tiny face, eyes squeezed shut, mouth open, in a wail that somehow cut through the noise of the storm. Josie looked around wildly, searching the darkness for whoever had left this child, but saw no one. She couldn't leave the baby in the rain. Without further hesitation, she gathered the basket and brought it inside, closing the door against the storm. Under the lantern light, she got her first good look at the infant. A boy, she thought, no more than a few months old. His face was red from crying, tiny fists balled up in anger or fear or both. The blanket that wrapped him was soaked at the edges but still dry closer to his body. It was a fine piece of work, not something a poor family would own. Along one corner, delicate embroidery spelled out the initials LC. "LC," Josie murmured, lifting the baby from the basket. "Who are you, little one? And who left you here?" The baby's cries softened as she held him against her chest, his tiny body warm through her dress. It had been years since she'd held a child. She and Tom had talked about having babies of their own, but fate had other plans. "Shh, you're safe now," she whispered, rocking gently. "The storm can't get you in here." She checked the basket for a note, some explanation, but found nothing. Just the baby and his initialed blanket, left on the doorstep of a widow in the middle of nowhere during the worst storm of the season. Josie moved around her small kitchen one-handed, heating milk on the stove while keeping the baby pressed to her shoulder. Her mind raced with questions. Who would leave their child? Why here at her isolated homestead? Was the mother in trouble? Dead, perhaps? "What am I going to do with you?" she asked softly as she tested the milk's temperature on her wrist. The baby's only answer was to root hungrily against her shoulder. She settled into her rocking chair and offered the milk in a spoon, the only method she could think of. The baby took it eagerly, and Josie found herself smiling for what felt like the first time in ages. Hungry little thing, aren't you? As the storm raged on outside, Josie felt something shifting inside her, something she thought had died along with Tom. A sense of purpose, maybe, or simply the awareness that for this moment, at least, she wasn't alone. The baby had just fallen asleep in her arms when the second knock came. This one was different, heavy, insistent. A man's knock. Josie tensed, instinctively holding the baby closer. The shotgun was still by the door, out of reach. "Who's there?" she called, loud enough to be heard over the storm. "Please," a deep voice answered, strained with emotion. "I'm looking for a baby. I was told. I think he might be here." Josie's heart pounded. She looked down at the sleeping infant in her arms, then back at the door. "How do I know he's yours to claim?" she demanded. There was a pause, then, "His blanket has initials on it. L.C. Levi Cade. He's my son." Josie swallowed hard. Those were, indeed, the initials on the blanket. But that didn't mean she was about to hand over a child to just anyone. "I've got a shotgun," she warned, though she had no way to reach it. "And I know how to use it." "Ma'am, I'm not here to cause trouble. I just want my boy back, please, and I've been searching for hours in this storm." Something in his voice, the raw desperation, made Josie stand up. Still cradling the baby, she crossed to the door and unbolted it with one hand, pulling it open. Just enough to see who stood on her porch. A man stood there, soaked to the bone, hat in hand. Water streamed from his dark hair down a face lined with exhaustion and something more. Fear, maybe, or grief. His clothes were muddy, his boots caked with it. He'd clearly been riding hard. His eyes, though, they went straight to the bundle. In her arms, and the naked emotion that crossed his face couldn't be faked. "Levi," he whispered, taking a half-step forward before stopping himself. Is he all right?" Josie studied him for a long moment, then stepped back, opening the door wider. "Come in out of the rain, mister. The boy's fine. Sleeping now." The man entered cautiously, setting his dripping hat on the peg by the door. Up close, she could see he was younger than she'd first thought, not much older than her own 27 years. His face was tanned from outdoor work, with the beginnings of lines around his eyes. "Name's Silas," he said, not taking his eyes off the baby. "Silas Cade." "Josie Mercer," she replied. "Want to tell me why your son was left on my doorstep in the middle of a storm with nothing but a blanket?" Silas ran a hand through his wet hair, leaving it standing up in places. "It's a long story, ma'am." "I've got time," Josie said coolly. "And I'm not handing over this child until I hear it." Something like respect flickered in his eyes. He nodded once, then looked around the small room, as if gathering his thoughts. "That boy," he said finally, voice raw, "is my blood. And if you've kept him safe, I owe you more than thanks. I owe you a life, if you'll let me build it here, with him, with you." Josie blinked, taken aback by his words. "Mr. Cade, I don't know what you're talking about, but I don't need a stranger making promises in my house. I need to know why this baby was abandoned on my porch." Silas's shoulders slumped. He wasn't abandoned. He was taken. Taken? By who? His mother's sister, I think. After Lucy, that's his mother, after she died giving birth to him. His voice caught on the words. "I wasn't ready to be a father, so I ran, left him with Lucy's family while I tried to, I don't know, make sense of it all. When I came back 3 days ago, he was gone. Her sister, too, took off with him." Josie felt a chill that had nothing to do with the storm. "And you think she left him here? Why would she do that?" "I don't know for sure it was her, but she always hated me." Silas looked up, his eyes meeting. Josie's directly. "Said I wasn't good enough for Lucy, that I'd never be a proper father. Maybe she thought leaving him with a stranger was better than letting me raise him." "And was she right?" Josie asked quietly, looking down at the sleeping baby. "Are you not good enough?" Silas was quiet for so long that Josie thought he might not answer. When he did, his voice was low and steady. "I wasn't ready to be a father, that's true. But running didn't fix anything. I realized that pretty quick. That's why I came back, only to find him gone." He took a step closer, close enough that Josie could see the dampness still clinging to his eyelashes. "I've been searching for 3 days, riding from town to town, asking everyone if they'd seen a woman with a baby. Finally, a storekeeper in Pine Creek said he'd heard a woman talking about a widow who lived alone out this way. Said maybe she'd want a baby, since she had none of her own." Josie felt her cheeks flush with anger. "So I was chosen, like some kind of charity case?" "I don't know, ma'am, I'm just telling you what I heard." Silas's eyes dropped to the baby again, May I hold him?" Something in his request, the tentative way he asked, as if expecting to be refused, softened Josie's anger. She hesitated only briefly before holding out the sleeping infant. Silas took the baby with careful hands, cradling him against his chest as if he might break. His whole body seemed to relax as he looked down at his son's face. "Hey there, little man," he whispered. "You've been on quite an adventure, haven't you?" The baby stirred in his sleep, one tiny hand escaping the blanket. Silas offered his finger, and the baby grasped it reflexively, holding tight even in sleep. The look on Silas's face then, part wonder, part fear, told Josie more than any words could have. This man might have run once, but he wouldn't be running again. "You can stay the night," Josie said, surprising herself. "It's too dangerous to travel in this storm, especially with a baby. There's a pallet I can make up by the fire." Silas looked up, genuine gratitude in his eyes. "Thank you, Mrs. Mercer. I won't forget this kindness." "It's Miss," Josie corrected him automatically. "Or just Josie. I was Mrs. Mercer when my husband was alive." "I'm sorry for your loss," he said, and it sounded sincere. Josie just nodded, not wanting to get into the story of Tom and his gold fever and the mountain that claimed him. Instead, she busied herself pulling out blankets for a makeshift bed. "The baby can sleep in that drawer for tonight," she said, pointing to a large wooden drawer she'd already lined with a soft towel. "It's not much, but it'll keep him safe and warm." Silas nodded, still holding his son close. "We've slept in worse places, haven't we, Levi?" he murmured to the baby. The night stretched on, the storm showing no signs of letting up. Silas eventually laid the baby in the makeshift crib, watching him sleep for a long while before settling on the pallet Josie had prepared. Josie should have gone to her own bed, but she found herself unable to leave. Instead, she sat in her rocking chair watching both the man and the baby by the dying firelight. There was something both comforting and unsettling about having others in her home after so long alone. "You don't have to stay up," Silas said softly, startling her. She hadn't realized he was still awake. "I won't take him and disappear in the night. I promise you that." "It's not that," Josie said, though it partly was. "I'm just not used to company anymore." Silas sat up, the blanket pooling around his waist. In the dim light, she could see he'd removed his shirt, probably to let it dry by the fire. The sight of his bare shoulders made her look away quickly. "How long have you been alone out here?" he asked. 2 years, Josie replied, "since Tom died." "That's a long time to manage a homestead by yourself." She bristled slightly. "I managed just fine." "I can see that," he said, and there was respect in his voice again. "Most women would have gone back to family or remarried." "I'm not most women," Josie said simply. Then, because she felt she owed him some explanation, "Tom went looking for gold up in the Cascades. Said he'd be back in a month with enough to buy us a real house in town. They found his body that winter, frozen in a ravine." Silas was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry," he said again. "It was his dream, not mine," Josie said, the old bitterness creeping into her voice. "I would have been happy right here, but he always wanted more." The baby made a small sound in his sleep, and both adults turned to look at the drawer. "What about you?" Josie asked, changing the subject. "Where were you headed with the baby once you found him?" Silas lay back down, staring at the ceiling. "I hadn't thought that far ahead, to be honest. I've got a little money saved, enough to rent a room somewhere for a while, maybe find steady work. I've been doing ranch hand jobs moving around. Can't do that with a baby, though." "No," Josie agreed, "you can't." They fell silent after that, listening to the rain on the roof and the occasional rumble of thunder, each lost in their own thoughts. Eventually, Josie got up and went to her bedroom, leaving the door cracked so she could hear if the baby woke. Morning came with watery sunlight filtering through the clouds. The storm had passed, leaving behind puddles and debris scattered across Josie's yard. She woke early, as always, and found Silas already up. He was sitting at her table, the baby in his arms, feeding him with more skill than she would have expected. "Morning," he said when he saw her. "Hope you don't mind, I heated some milk for him, he was hungry." "That's fine," Josie said, tying an apron around her waist. "You seem to know what you're doing." A shadow crossed Silas's face. "I was there when he was born. Stayed for a week before—" He trailed off, looking down at his son. "Before I convinced myself I couldn't do this, Josie busied herself at the stove, cracking eggs into a pan. "And now?" she asked without looking at him. "Now I know I have to try," Silas said. "For his sake." They ate breakfast together, the baby dozing in Silas's arms. It was strange how quickly the house had gone from empty to full, Josie thought, and stranger still was how natural it felt, having them there. After breakfast, Silas stepped outside to check on his horse, which he'd apparently left tied under the shelter of a large oak nearby. Josie took the opportunity to hold the baby again, breathing in his sweet scent. "Your daddy came back for you," she whispered. "That's more than some get." When Silas returned, his expression was troubled. "My horse threw a shoe in all that mud last night," he said. "He's lame now. We won't be able to travel today." Josie should have felt annoyed at the prospect of housing unexpected guests even longer. Instead, she felt something closer to relief. "You can stay another night," she said. "I'll help you with the baby." Silas looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable in his eyes. "Why are you helping us?" Josie hadn't asked herself that question. She wasn't usually one to get involved in other people's problems, but looking at the baby in her arms and at the man standing in her doorway, a man who had ridden through a storm to find his son, she found her answer. "Because sometimes people deserve a second chance," she said, "even if it's not what they expected." Silas nodded slowly, understanding passing between them. "Thank you, Josie," he said. And for the first time since he'd arrived on her porch, he smiled. Just a small upturning of his lips, but it transformed his face, showing a glimpse of the man he might be when not weighed down by guilt and worry. Josie felt something flutter in her chest, something she hadn't felt in a very long time. She quickly looked away, focusing on the baby instead. "Well," she said briskly, "if you're staying, you might as well make yourself useful. The storm knocked down some branches near the chicken coop. They need clearing before the hens can go out." Silas's smile widened just a fraction. "Yes, ma'am," he said, reaching for his hat. "I think I can manage that." As he walked out into the yard, Josie stood in the doorway with little Levi, watching Silas roll up his sleeves and set to work. One night had turned into more, and she had no idea what would happen next. But for the first time in 2 years, she was looking forward to finding out. The storm had brought them three together. What came next would be up to them. Days passed, and Silas's horse remained lame. Or at least, that's what he claimed each morning, after checking on the animal. Josie had her doubts. The limping seemed to improve when Silas led the horse to water, only to worsen mysteriously when the subject of leaving came up. But she didn't press the issue. Truth be told, having Silas and baby Levi around had changed something in her small homestead. The house felt alive again. "I should pay you," Silas said on the fourth morning, watching Josie mix formula for Levi. "For letting us stay." Josie shook her head. "You've been earning your keep. Fixed my leaky roof, repaired the chicken coop, chopped enough firewood to last me half the winter." "Still," Silas insisted, "it doesn't seem right, imposing on you like this." Josie handed him the bottle. "You're not imposing if I want you here." Their eyes met briefly, and something unspoken passed between them. Silas was the first to look away, focusing on feeding his son. "You're good with him," Josie observed, watching how naturally Silas held the baby now. For someone who didn't think he could be a father. Silas's mouth twisted in a half-smile. "I'm figuring it out as I go, like most things in life, I suppose." Levi gurgled happily around his bottle, one tiny hand reaching up to pat Silas's stubbled cheek. The look of pure love on Silas's face in that moment made Josie's heart ache in a way that was both painful and sweet. "I need to go into town today," she said, turning away to hide the emotion on her face. "We're running low on supplies." "I'll come with you," Silas offered immediately. "Help carry things." Josie hesitated. They hadn't left the homestead since Silas arrived. Going into Larkspur Ridge together with the baby, people would talk. "Don't worry about what folks might say," Silas said, reading her thoughts. "I can tell them I'm your cousin passing through." "No," Josie said firmly. "I won't lie. Let them talk if they want to. I've never much cared for town gossip anyway." Silas studied her face. "You sure? People can be cruel." "I'm sure," Josie replied, lifting her chin. "Besides, Levi needs a proper cradle. Can't keep sleeping in that drawer forever. So it was decided. They hitched Josie's old mare to the wagon and set off for town, baby Levi wrapped snugly against Silas's chest. It was a fine autumn day, the kind that made the hills around Larkspur Ridge glow golden in the sunlight. "It's beautiful country," Silas commented as they traveled. "Reminds me of where I grew up over in the next valley." "You're from around here?" Josie asked, surprised. Silas nodded. "Born and raised, though I left when I was 16. Too restless to stay in one place back then." "And now?" He looked down at Levi, sleeping peacefully against his chest. "Now I'm thinking a man needs roots, especially when he's got someone depending on him." The streets of Larkspur Ridge were busy with the usual Saturday traffic. Farmers bringing goods. At a market, families doing their weekly shopping. Josie felt the stares as soon as they pulled up in front of the general store, curious eyes taking in the sight of the widow Mercer with a handsome stranger and a baby. "Ignore them," she murmured to Silas as she climbed down from the wagon. Inside the store, Mrs. Peterson was behind the counter. Her eyebrows shot up at the sight of them, but she managed a polite greeting. "Josie, haven't seen you in town for a while. And who might these gentlemen be?" Before Josie could answer, a baby's cry came from the back of the store. Mrs. Peterson's daughter Emma appeared, bouncing her own 6-month-old on her hip. "Sorry, Ma, little James is teething something fierce today." Levi, hearing another baby, began to fuss in response. Silas gently rocked him, murmuring soothing words. Emma's eyes widened as she took in the scene. "Oh, I didn't know you had—" "Company, Mrs. Mercer. This is Silas Cade," Josie said evenly, "and his son Levi." The silence that followed was thick with unasked questions. Josie could practically see the wheels turning in Mrs. Peterson's head, calculating how quickly this gossip could spread through town. "We need some supplies," Josie continued, ignoring the tension. "Flour, sugar, coffee. And do you have any baby things? Levi's outgrowing what he has." Mrs. Peterson blinked, then slipped into her professional manner. "Of course. Emma, show Mrs. Mercer where the baby things are." As Josie followed Emma to the back of the store, she heard Mrs. Peterson start questioning Silas. "So, Mr. Cade, how do you know our Josie?" Silas's deep voice carried clearly. "She took us in during that bad storm last week. Saved my boy from catching his death of cold. I owe her more than I can say." His simple honesty seemed to catch Mrs. Peterson off guard. Josie smiled to herself as she examined tiny shirts and soft blankets. Emma, however, wasn't as easily diverted. "Is he staying with you?" she whispered to Josie. "People are already talking, you know." "Let them talk," Josie replied, selecting a blue shirt that would bring out Levi's eyes. "Silas needed help. I had room. It's as simple as that." Emma looked skeptical. "Nothing's ever that simple with a man like that." "A man like what?" You know," Emma lowered her voice further, "handsome with those sad eyes, the kind that makes women want to fix him." Josie felt her cheeks warm. "I'm not trying to fix anyone." Emma gave her a knowing look. "If you say so. Just be careful, Josie. Men come and go, but a reputation sticks." By the time they returned to the front of the store, Mrs. Peterson was wrapping up a small wooden toy that Silas had apparently purchased for Levi. The older woman's attitude had softened noticeably. "Such a sweet baby," she was saying. "Got your eyes, Mr. Cade." His mother's smile, though, Silas replied quietly. She'd be grateful to know he's being looked after so well. Mrs. Peterson's expression turned sympathetic. "I was sorry to hear about your loss, Mr. Cade. A child needs his mother, but a good father makes all the difference in the world." Josie placed her selections on the counter, including a soft blanket for Levi. "We'll take these too, Mrs. Peterson." As the shopkeeper tallied their purchases, the door opened, and Sheriff Roberts walked in. He nodded to Mrs. Peterson, then did a double-take when he saw Silas and the baby. "Well now," he said, hand resting casually on his gun belt. "Don't believe we've met." Silas shifted Levi to one arm and extended his hand. "Silas Cade, sir." The sheriff shook his hand, eyes narrowed slightly. "Passing through?" "Staying with Miss Mercer for a time," Silas replied evenly. "My horse threw a shoe in that storm last week." Sheriff Roberts looked to Josie. "That right, Josie? This man's staying at your place?" Josie straightened her spine. "That's right, Sheriff. Silas and his son needed shelter. I provided it. The sheriff's gaze traveled between them, assessing. Tom Mercer was a good friend of mine, he said finally. He'd want someone looking out for his widow. I appreciate the concern, Josie said coolly, but I can look out for myself. Always have. An uncomfortable silence fell over the store. Silas cleared his throat. Sheriff, I understand your concern. A stranger shows up with a baby, staying with a woman on her own. I'd be suspicious too. But I promise you, my intentions are honorable. As soon as my horse is fit to travel, I'll be settling somewhere proper to raise my boy. Sheriff Roberts studied him for a long moment, then seemed to come to a decision. The livery's got a wagon that needs a driver, taking supplies. Up to the logging camp next week. Good pay for a few days' work if you're interested. Silas blinked in surprise. I'd be much obliged, Sheriff. Good. Stop by the livery this afternoon. Talk to Jim about it. The sheriff tipped his hat to Josie. Tom would be proud of you helping folks in need. Just be careful. With that, he made his purchase and left. Mrs. Peterson, who had been pretending not to listen, quickly finished wrapping their supplies. That'll be $3.45, she said. Silas reached for his wallet, but Josie was faster. I've got it, she said, counting out the money. At least let me pay for the baby things, Silas protested. You can pay me back by fixing that loose board on my porch, Josie replied. Then, noticing Mrs. Peterson's interested expression, she added, and by taking this job with the livery, earn some money for you and Levi. Outside, as they loaded the supplies into the wagon, Silas looked troubled. What's wrong? Josie asked. If I take that job, I'll be gone for several days, he said. I can't take Levi with me to a logging camp. Josie understood the unspoken question. I can watch him while you're gone, she offered. If you trust me. With him, that is. Silas's eyes softened. I trust you with him more than anyone. It's just... Are you sure? It's a lot to ask. I'm sure, Josie said. And she was. The thought of Silas leaving, even temporarily, made her chest tight. But the idea of keeping Levi with her eased that feeling somewhat. They rode back to the homestead in thoughtful silence. After unloading the supplies, Silas went to speak with Jim at the livery, taking Levi with him. Josie used the time alone to think. Having Silas and the baby in her home had awakened feelings she thought were long dead. Not just the tender protectiveness she felt toward Levi, but something else when it came to Silas. Something that both frightened and excited her. Emma's words echoed in her mind. Men come and go, but a reputation sticks. Was she being foolish? Letting herself care for a man who had already proven himself capable of running away once. By the time Silas returned, Josie had supper cooking on the stove. The smell of fresh bread filled the small house. I got the job, Silas announced, setting a now sleeping Levi in his drawer bed. Leaving Monday morning, back by Friday if the weather holds. That's good, Josie said, stirring the stew. The pay? Better than I expected. Enough to start looking for a place of our own when I get back. He paused, watching her. I was thinking, there's that old Johnson place about a mile down the road. Been empty for a year now, might be for rent. Josie's spoon stilled. You're thinking of staying in Larkspur Ridge? Silas moved closer, leaning against the counter beside her. I've been thinking a lot of things lately. Their eyes met, and this time neither looked away. Josie was acutely aware of how close he stood. Close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. Josie, he said softly, I need to tell you something about why I ran after Levi was born. She waited, heart beating fast in her chest. Lucy and I, we weren't married, Silas continued, his voice low. We were going to be, had it all planned out. But she got sick during the pregnancy, really sick. By the time Levi came, she was too weak. His voice caught. Her last words were, asking me to take care of him, and I couldn't. I looked at that tiny baby and all I could see was that I'd failed his mother, that I'd fail him too. Josie's throat felt tight. Silas, no, let me finish, he said. I ran because I was scared. Scared of loving someone that much again, only to lose them, scared of not being enough. He took a deep breath. But every day I'm here with you, watching how you are with Levi, how you face things head-on instead of running. I'm learning what it means to be brave. Before Josie could respond, Levi began to cry. The moment broke, and Silas stepped away to tend to his son. That night, after Silas had fallen asleep on his pallet by the fire, Josie sat in her rocking chair, unable to rest. His words played over and over in her mind. "I'm learning what it means to be brave." Was she brave? It had never felt like bravery, staying on this homestead after Tom died. It had felt like stubbornness, like having nowhere else to go. But maybe there was a kind of courage in that too, in facing each day alone, in building a life from broken pieces. Now Silas was talking about finding a place nearby, about staying in Larkspur Ridge. The thought filled her with a confusing mix of hope and fear. Monday morning came too quickly. Silas packed a small bag while Josie prepared bottles for Levi. "I've written down everything you need to know," Silas said, handing her a folded paper. "How he likes to be held when he's fussy, the song that helps him sleep." Josie smiled at his nervousness. "We'll be fine. This isn't my first time watching him, you know." "I know." Silas looked around the small house, at Levi playing on a blanket on the floor, at Josie standing in the kitchen she'd made her own. "It's just strange, leaving him, leaving both of you." "It's just a few days," Josie reminded him. "And you'll come back with money in your pocket. A fresh start." Silas nodded, but something in his expression told her he was thinking the same thing she was. They'd already started something here, in this house, during these quiet days together. The wagon from the livery arrived to pick him up. Silas knelt beside Levi, pressing a kiss to his son's forehead. "You be good for Miss Josie," he whispered. "Daddy will be back soon." Then he stood and faced Josie. For a moment they just looked at each other, all the unspoken feelings between them hanging in the air. "Thank you," Silas said finally. "For everything." Josie nodded, not trusting her voice. Then, surprising herself, she stepped forward and hugged him quickly. "Be careful," she said. Silas hugged her back, his arms strong around her. "I will," he promised, and then he was gone, climbing into the wagon with one last look back at the house where his son would wait for him. The first day without Silas was strange. The house seemed quieter, despite Levi's occasional cries and babbles. Josie found herself talking to the baby more than usual, as if to fill the silence. "Your daddy will be back soon," she told him, as she rocked him that night. "He's working hard for you, for your future." Levi gazed up at her with solemn eyes that looked so much like his father's, his tiny hand wrapped around her finger, holding tight. "You know," Josie continued softly, "when your daddy first showed up on my porch that night, I wasn't sure what to think. Men have a way of making promises they can't keep." She stroked Levi's cheek. "But I think your daddy's different. I think he means to keep his word this time." The baby smiled at her, a gummy, innocent smile that melted something inside her. "And between you and me," she whispered, "I'm starting to hope he does." The days passed in a routine of feeding, changing, and playing with Levi. Josie took him outside when the weather was nice, showing him the chickens, the vegetable garden, the hills beyond. She found herself pointing things out, naming them as if he could understand. "That's a blue jay," she'd say. "And over there, see those yellow flowers? Those are black-eyed Susans." In the quiet moments, when Levi was napping, Josie allowed herself to imagine what it would be like if this arrangement became permanent, not with Silas living in a separate house down the road, but here, with her, the three of them together. It was a dangerous thought. On Thursday, Josie decided to take Levi into town. She needed more formula, and if she was honest with herself, she was hoping for news of the logging camp delivery. Mrs. Peterson's eyes lit up when Josie entered the store with Levi in her arms. "Well, look who's playing Mama," she said, coming around the counter to coo at the baby. "Where's your handsome friend today?" "Working," Josie replied, "delivering supplies to the logging camp." "Ah, yes, Sheriff mentioned that." Mrs. Peterson tickled Levi under the chin. "Jim from the livery was in yesterday. Said there's been some trouble up at the camp, a dispute with some of the men." Josie's heart skipped a beat. "What kind of trouble?" Mrs. Peterson shrugged. "Didn't say specifically, just that the sheriff might need to ride up there if things didn't settle down." Worry gnawed at Josie for the rest of the day. That night she found it hard to sleep, her mind conjuring images of Silas in danger. "He'll be fine," she told herself firmly as she paced the floor with a fussy Levi. "He's a grown man, he can take care of himself." But the worry remained, a constant companion as she went about her chores on Friday. Silas had said he'd be back by evening if the weather held, and the day was clear and bright. Still, Josie found herself checking the road more often than necessary. When the sun began to set with no sign of him, her worry deepened to fear. She put Levi to bed and sat by the window, watching the darkness gather outside. It was well past midnight when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Josie rushed to the door, lamp in hand, her heart pounding. Silas dismounted slowly, his movements stiff. As he stepped into the circle of lamplight, Josie gasped. His face was bruised, a cut above. His right eye crusted with dried blood. "My God, what happened?" she demanded, ushering him inside. "Disagreement at the camp," Silas said wearily. "Some of the men didn't take kindly to the supplies being a day late." He looked around the small room. "Is Levi—" "He's fine," Josie assured him. "Sleeping. Sit down before you fall down." Silas sank into a chair at the kitchen table, while Josie fetched water and a clean cloth. She worked in silence, gently cleaning the cut on his face. "I'm sorry I'm late," Silas said. "I wanted to get back when I said I would." "You're here now," Josie replied, her fingers gentle on his bruised cheek. "That's what matters." Silas caught her hand, holding it against his face. "When those men jumped me," he said quietly, "all I could think about was getting back here, to Levi, to you." Josie's breath caught in her throat. They were so close now, his eyes holding hers in the lamplight. "I know it's too soon," Silas continued. "I know you barely know me, but Josie, these past 2 weeks have meant more to me than I can say." "Silas," she began, not sure what she wanted to tell him, that she was scared, that she was hopeful, that every time he looked at her like that, she felt more alive than she had in years. Before she could find the words, a cry came from the bedroom. Levi was awake. Silas released her hand. "I should go to him." Josie nodded, stepping back. "He's missed you." She watched as Silas went to his son, his face transforming with love, as he lifted the baby from his makeshift bed. The sight of them, together father and son reunited, brought tears to Josie's eyes. "Hey, little man," Silas murmured. "Daddy's home." As Levi settled against his father's chest, Silas looked up and caught Josie watching them. The expression in his eyes took her breath away, gratitude and something deeper, something that made her pulse quicken. In that moment, Josie knew. Whatever happened next, her life had already changed. The storm that brought them to her door had washed away her solitude, leaving something new and fragile in its place, something worth being brave for. Autumn settled fully over Larkspur Ridge, painting the hills in shades of gold and crimson. 3 weeks had passed since Silas and Levi arrived on Josie's doorstep, and life had fallen into a comfortable rhythm. Silas had found steady work at the livery, his skill with horses earning him a reputation as a reliable hand. Each evening he returned to Josie's homestead with stories of his day and small gifts for Levi. A wooden horse carved by one of the old-timers, a colorful stone from the creek bed. On this particular evening, he arrived with something different, a newspaper folded under his arm and a thoughtful expression on his face. "What is it?" Josie asked as she set supper on the table. Levi sat in a makeshift high chair Silas had built, banging a spoon happily. Silas laid the newspaper on the table. "Found this at the livery. There's an advertisement, that old Johnson place I mentioned. It's for sale, not just for rent. Owner's moved to Oregon, wants to be rid of it." Josie glanced at the paper, her heart giving an odd little skip. "You're thinking of buying it?" "Thinking about it," Silas said carefully. "Jim says the price is fair, and I've been saving most of what I earn." "It's a nice property," Josie allowed, serving up stew to hide the sudden tremor in her hands. "Good water source, decent barn." "It would need work," Silas admitted, taking his seat, "but it could be a real home for Levi, for us." The word "us" hung in the air between them. Silas had been sleeping on the floor of Josie's main room all this time, a temporary arrangement that had somehow stretched into weeks. They both knew it couldn't continue indefinitely, not without raising more eyebrows in town than they already had. It's a big decision, Josie said finally. Putting down roots like that. Silas nodded, watching her face. Biggest I've ever made, I reckon, but it feels right. After supper, while Josie washed the dishes, Silas took Levi onto the porch to watch the sunset. Through the window, she could hear him pointing things out to his son, naming the colors of the sky, the sounds of the evening birds. She'd grown used to the sound of his voice in her home, to the sight of him holding Levi, to the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. The thought of them moving to their own place brought a hollow feeling to her chest. But it was the right thing, she told herself firmly. Silas needed his own home, a proper place to raise his son. And she needed to remember that this arrangement had always been temporary. The next day was Sunday. Usually Josie skipped church, preferring to avoid the curious stares and whispered comments. But today, Silas suggested they go. If I'm going to settle here, he explained, people need to see I'm serious about being part of the community. Building a life here. Josie agreed, though with some trepidation. She wore her best dress, a simple blue cotton that she hadn't put on since Tom's funeral. Silas cleaned up well too, his dark hair slicked back, his only good shirt freshly ironed, with Levi dressed in the new clothes they'd bought in town. They made quite the picture as they walked into church together. Heads turned, whispers followed, but Silas held his head high, one hand at the small of Josie's back, the other holding Levi securely. Pastor Williams greeted them at the door with genuine warmth. Josie, wonderful to see you back with us, and this must be Mr. Cade and little Levi I've heard about. That's right, Pastor, Silas said, shaking the older man's hand. I hope you don't mind us joining your congregation. All are welcome in God's house, the pastor replied, though his eyes held a hint of questions as they moved between Silas and Josie. They took a seat near the back, aware of the glances being cast their way. Mrs. Peterson was there with her daughter Emma, who offered Josie a small, encouraging smile. Sheriff Roberts nodded to them from his place near the front. The service passed without incident, though Josie found it hard to concentrate on the sermon. She was too aware of Silas beside her, of the way they must look to others, like a family. After church, several people stopped to speak with them, curiosity thinly veiled as friendliness. Such a handsome baby, Mrs. Wilson commented, peering at Levi in Silas's arms. Takes after his father, I see. His mother's eyes, though, Silas replied, the familiar sadness crossing his face whenever Lucy was referenced, even indirectly. And how long will you be staying in Larkspur Ridge, Mr. Cade? Mr. Harmon asked, his tone making it clear what he thought of Silas's current living arrangement. Actually, Silas said, meeting the man's gaze directly, I'm looking to put down roots here, thinking of buying the old Johnson place. This news caused a ripple of interest among those nearby. Josie could almost see the reassessment happening in their eyes. Silas wasn't just a drifter after all, but a man looking to establish himself properly. Sheriff Roberts approached as the crowd began to disperse. Heard you're interested in the Johnson property, he said to Silas. Good piece of land, needs some attention, but solid bones. That's what I'm thinking, Silas agreed, hoping to take a proper look at it tomorrow if Mr. Johnson's agent is available. The sheriff nodded. I'll put in a word with Barker at the bank. He's handling the sale. He glanced at Josie. Good to see you in church, Josie. Tom would be pleased. She bristled at the mention of her late husband. Tom wasn't much for church himself, if you recall. No, the sheriff acknowledged with a slight smile. But he always said you were the better of the two of you. As they walked home, Levi dozing against Silas's shoulder, Josie found herself thinking about the future more concretely than she had in years. Silas would buy the Johnson place. He and Levi would move out. Life would go back to what it was before they arrived, quiet, predictable, lonely. You're awful quiet, Silas observed as they approached the homestead. Just thinking, Josie replied. About what? She hesitated, then decided on honesty. About how strange it will be when you and Levi are gone. Silas stopped walking, turning to face her. Gone? Josie, the Johnson place is barely a mile down the road. I know, she said, but it won't be the same as having you here. Something softened in Silas's eyes. No, it won't be the same, he agreed, but that doesn't mean we won't still see each other. If you want to, that is. Of course I want to, Josie said quickly, then felt heat rise to her cheeks at how eager she sounded. Silas shifted Levi to his other shoulder, stepping closer to Josie. I've been wanting to talk to you about something. About us. Josie's heart began to beat faster. Us? These past weeks, Silas began, his voice low and earnest. Living here with you, seeing how you are with Levi, how you've opened your home. To us, it's made me realize what I want, what I need. Before he could continue, the sound of an approaching wagon interrupted them. They both turned to see Jim from the livery driving toward them. Silas, he called. Glad I caught you. Got a telegram from the logging camp. They need another delivery tomorrow. Emergency supplies. Boss says you're the man for the job after how you handled yourself last time. Silas's face showed his conflict. Tomorrow. I was planning to look at the Johnson property. Camp's offering double pay, Jim added, on account of the short notice. Josie could see the calculation in Silas's eyes. Double pay meant getting closer to making an offer on the house. I'll do it, he said finally. What time do I leave? First light, Jim replied. Should be a 2-day trip if the weather holds. After Jim left, the moment between them had passed. Whatever Silas had been about to say remained unspoken as they returned to the practical matters of preparing for his departure. That night, after Levi was asleep, Silas sat at the kitchen table writing in a small notebook. Josie, mending a shirt by the fire, glanced up to find him watching her. What? She asked. Nothing, he said, smiling slightly. Just thinking how right you look, sitting there in the firelight. Josie felt her cheeks warm again. You're leaving. At first light, she reminded him. Should get some sleep. I know, Silas agreed, but made no move to prepare his bedroll. Instead, he closed his notebook and leaned forward. Josie, about what I was going to say earlier. It can wait until you get back, she interrupted, suddenly afraid of what he might say, afraid of how much she wanted to hear it. Silas studied her face, then nodded slowly. All right, when I get back. The morning came too quickly. Silas left with the dawn, pressing a kiss to Levi's forehead and squeezing Josie's hand. 2 days, he promised. 3 at the most. Josie watched him ride away, Levi balanced on her hip, an odd sense of foreboding settling in her stomach. The first day passed uneventfully. Josie went about her chores, played with Levi, told him stories about his father. The second day, storm clouds began to gather on the horizon. By evening, rain was falling steadily, drumming on the roof in a way that reminded Josie of the night. Levi had first arrived on her doorstep. Your daddy will be careful, she assured the baby as she rocked him to sleep. He knows these mountains better than most, but as the night wore on and the storm intensified, her worry grew. She thought of Silas out in this weather, thought of the steep mountain trails to the logging camp, so easily washed out by heavy rain. Morning brought no relief. The rain continued, and there was no sign of Silas. Josie tried to keep busy, to push away the fear that clawed at her throat. By the third day, her worry had turned to dread. When she saw Sheriff Roberts riding toward her house through the rain, her heart nearly stopped. Josie, he said, removing his hat as she opened the door. May I come in? His grave expression told her everything before he spoke a word. She stepped back, clutching Levi tighter. There's been an accident, the sheriff said once he was inside. Up at Sawyer's Ridge. The delivery wagon went off the trail during the storm. Silas? Josie's voice was barely a whisper. They found the wagon at the bottom of a ravine. No sign of Silas yet. The sheriff's eyes were kind but honest. They're still searching, but with this rain and the time that's passed, Josie felt the room tilt beneath her. Levi, sensing her distress, began to whimper. No, she said firmly. No, he's alive, he has to be. Josie, Sheriff Roberts began, his tone gentle. He promised he'd come back, she insisted, tears threatening to spill. He wouldn't leave, Levi, he wouldn't leave me. The unspoken word hung in the air. The sheriff sighed. I've got men out looking. Jim from the livery rode up this morning with a search party. If he's out there, we'll find him. But his tone held little hope. After the sheriff left, Josie moved around the house in a daze. She fed Levi, changed him, went through the motions of her daily routine while her mind screamed. In denial, Silas couldn't be gone. Not when they were just beginning. not when there was so much left unsaid between them. As night fell again, Josie sat in her rocking chair, Levi asleep against her chest. The storm had finally passed, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. She stared into the dying fire, remembering how Silas had looked sitting there, his face cast in golden light as he played with his son or told her stories of his travels. A sound from outside made her sit up straight. Footsteps on the porch. A thump, as if someone had fallen against the door. Heart racing, Josie laid Levi carefully in his makeshift crib and grabbed the shotgun. "Who's there?" she called, her voice steadier than she felt. No answer came, but the doorknob turned slowly. Josie raised the shotgun, finger on the trigger. The door swung open to reveal Silas, barely standing, mud-covered and bloody, one arm hanging at an odd angle. His eyes found hers, filled with pain and relief. "Josie," he whispered, and then collapsed. Forward. Josie dropped the shotgun and rushed to catch him, staggering under his weight. Somehow she managed to help him to the chair by the fire. His clothes were soaked through, his skin cold to the touch. "My God, Silas," she breathed, quickly assessing his injuries. The broken arm was the worst of it, though a gash on his head had bled profusely. "What happened?" "They said the wagon went off the trail." "It did," he confirmed, wincing as she helped him remove his sodden jacket. "Got thrown clear, thank the Lord. Took me a day to climb back up to the trail, then another to make it down the mountain." "You walked all the way back?" Josie asked, disbelief and admiration mingling in her voice. Silas's eyes sought hers, intensity burning through his exhaustion. "I promised I'd come back." Something broke open inside Josie then. The fear she'd been holding at bay, the grief she'd refused to acknowledge, the love she'd been too afraid to name, it all rushed through her at once. "You stubborn, foolish man," she said, voice catching as tears spilled down her cheeks. "You could have died out there." "Couldn't die," Silas replied simply. "Not when I have something to live for." His good hand reached for hers. Two somethings, actually. Josie squeezed his hand, then forced herself to focus on practical matters. "We need to get you warm and dry, and that arm needs setting." While Silas sat by the fire, Josie fetched dry clothes, hot water, and the medical supplies she kept on hand. Levi, miraculously, slept through it all. "I'll need to ride for the doctor in the morning," Josie said as she cleaned the wound on Silas's head. "But for tonight I can splint the arm to keep it stable." Silas nodded, watching her work with eyes that never left her face. "You're good at this," he observed, "taking care of people." "Had plenty of practice with Tom," Josie replied. "Always coming home with some injury or another from his adventures." "Must have been hard," Silas said, "watching him chase his dreams while you stayed behind." Josie's hands stilled. No one had ever put it quite like that before, acknowledging that she had dreams too, dreams that had been set aside for Tom's. "It was," she admitted. "I loved him, but sometimes I felt invisible, like what I wanted didn't matter as much." "What did you want?" Silas asked softly. Josie resumed wrapping his arm, considering the question. "A real home," she said finally. "Not just a place to live, but a home. Children. A partner who saw me, really saw me." "And now?" Silas's voice was barely above a whisper. "What do you want now, Josie?" She finished tying off the bandage before meeting his eyes. "I want not to be afraid anymore," she said honestly. "Afraid of hoping for things that might not happen. Afraid of loving someone who might leave." "I'm not leaving," Silas said with quiet certainty. "Not you, not Levi. Never again." The conviction in his voice made her breath catch. "You can't promise that. Life doesn't work that way." "No," he agreed. "I can't promise nothing bad will ever happen, but I can promise that as long as I have breath in my body, I'll come back to you, both of you." Josie wanted to believe him, wanted it more than she'd wanted anything in a long time. But the cautious part of her, the part that had learned the hard way about broken promises, held back. "You need rest," she said, standing up. "I'll make up the bed for you. You can't sleep on the floor with that arm." "And you?" Silas asked. "I'll take the chair." She gestured to the rocking chair. "It's comfortable enough." Silas started to protest, but exhaustion was overtaking him rapidly. By the time Josie had prepared the bed, he was barely able to stand. She helped him to the bedroom, easing him down onto the mattress. "Levi?" he murmured, already half asleep. "He's fine, sleeping peacefully." Josie pulled the blanket over him. "Rest now, you're home." Home. The word slipped out naturally, and Josie didn't try to take it back. Because somehow in these few short weeks, that's what this place had become for all three of them, a home. She turned to leave, but Silas caught her hand with his good one. "Josie," he said, his eyes fighting to stay open. "What I was trying to tell you before about us—" "Shh," she soothed. "It can wait until morning." "No," he insisted. "Spent too long not saying important things. Don't want to wait anymore." He took a deep breath. "I love you, Josie Mercer. Loved you since that first night when you took in my son without question, when you stood there with that shotgun, protecting a baby you didn't even know." Josie felt tears prick her eyes again. "Silas, don't have to say anything back," he continued, words slurring slightly with exhaustion. "Just wanted you to know, in case I didn't get another chance." And then he was asleep, his hand still holding hers, his breathing deep and even. Josie stood there for a long moment, looking down at this man who had crashed into her life like the storm that brought him, wild and unexpected and changing everything in his wake. "I love you too," she whispered, though he couldn't hear her. "God help me, but I do." She checked on Levi, finding him still peacefully asleep, then settled into the rocking chair for the night. Sleep was a long time coming, her mind too full of all that had happened, all that Silas had said. Morning brought news that the search party had been called off, the presumed victim having found his own way home. Sheriff Roberts himself rode out to see Silas, his relief evident. "Thought we'd lost you for sure," he admitted. Watching as Josie prepared breakfast one-handed, Levi balanced on her hip. "Must have been quite a shock for Josie here when you showed up." "The good kind of shock," Josie replied, setting a plate in front of the sheriff. "Better than the alternative." Dr. Miller arrived soon after, properly setting Silas's arm and stitching the gash on his head. "You're a lucky man, Mr. Cade," he commented. "Fall like that could have killed you." "Wasn't luck, Doc," Silas said, his eyes finding Josie across. "The room had something worth fighting to get back to." The doctor glanced between them, a knowing look crossing his face. "Well, whatever it was, it served you well. Arm should heal clean if you keep it still. No riding, no heavy lifting for at least 6 weeks." After the doctor and sheriff left, a thoughtful quiet settled over the house. Silas sat in Josie's rocking chair, Levi in his lap, while Josie prepared lunch. "What happens now?" she asked finally, voicing the question that had been on her mind all morning. "Now?" Silas considered. "Now I heal. Can't work at the livery with this arm, but Jim says he'll hold my job." "And the Johnson place?" Josie kept her voice carefully neutral. "Still want to look at it," Silas said. "Still think it could be a good home for us." Josie turned to face him. "Us?" Silas met her gaze steadily. "I meant what I said last night, Josie. Every word." She felt her heart beating faster. "You were half delirious with pain and exhaustion. Doesn't make it any less true." He shifted Levi to his good arm and stood, crossing to where she stood. "I love you, and if you'll have me, have us. I want to build a life with you." Josie looked into his eyes, searching for doubt or hesitation and finding none. Only certainty and love and hope. "What kind of life?" she asked, needing to be sure they wanted the same things. Silas smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling in the way she'd grown to love. "The kind with a home, a real home like you said, with children starting with this little one here. With a partner who sees you, Josie. Who really sees you." Her throat tightened with emotion. "And what about your wandering ways? You said yourself. You've never stayed in one place long." "That was before," Silas said simply. "Before Levi, before you, before I understood what matters most." Josie wanted to believe him, wanted it with every fiber of her being, but one last fear held her back. "What if it doesn't work?" she whispered. "What if we try and it all falls apart?" Silas shifted Levi to his shoulder, freeing his good hand to touch Josie's cheek. "What if it does work?" he countered softly. "What if this is everything we've both been looking for?" Looking into his eyes, feeling the gentle touch of his hand, Josie felt the last of her resistance crumbling. She'd spent 2 years being cautious, protecting herself from more hurt. Maybe it was time to be brave again, to take a chance on happiness. "I love you too," she said, the words coming easier than she'd expected. "I think I have since that first night too." The smile that broke across Silas's face was like sunrise after the longest night. "Then say yes, Josie Mercer. Say you'll build this life with us." Levi chose that moment to reach out, his small hand patting Josie's cheek as if in encouragement. They both laughed, the tension of the moment breaking. "Yes," Josie said, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. "Yes to all of it." Silas leaned forward, closing the distance between them. His kiss was gentle but sure, a promise sealed. When they parted, both were smiling, Levi babbling happily between them, as if he understood the significance of the moment. "So," Silas said, eyes twinkling, "should we look at the Johnson place when I'm back on my feet? Or were you thinking of something else?" Josie glanced around the small homestead that had been her sanctuary and her prison these past 2 years. She'd stayed here out of loyalty to Tom's memory, out of stubbornness, out of fear of change. But now, looking at Silas and Levi, she realized home wasn't about a place at all. It was about the people you shared it with. "Actually," she said, surprising herself with the certainty she felt, "I was thinking we could stay right here, build onto this place, make it ours together." The look of joy that spread across Silas's face told her she'd made the right choice. "I'd like that," he said. "I'd like that very much." Outside, the autumn sun broke through the clouds, casting golden light across the yard where the three of them would build their future, together. Winter came to Larkspur Ridge, bringing with it short days and long nights. Snow blanketed the hills, transforming the landscape into a glistening white expanse. Inside Josie's homestead, their homestead now, warmth and activity kept the cold at bay. Silas's arm had healed well, though Dr. Miller warned he might feel the change in weather in that bone for years to come. He'd returned to work at the livery, his position secure thanks to Jim's loyalty and his own growing reputation as the best horseman in the county. On this particular December morning, Josie stood at the window watching as Silas cleared a path through the snow to the chicken coop. His breath clouded in the frigid air, his movements strong and sure. It still amazed her sometimes how quickly life could change. 3 months ago, she'd been alone in this house, resigned to a solitary future. Now she had a family. Levi, now nearly 8 months old, crawled energetically across the floor, investigating everything within reach. He'd grown so much in the time they'd had him, not just in size but in personality. His first tooth had come in, accompanied by many sleepless nights. His babbling had expanded to include sounds that almost resembled words. Dada was clear, enough to make Silas beam with pride. "Careful there, little explorer," Josie said, scooping him up as he headed for the fireplace. "That's not for baby hands." Levi squirmed in her arms, determined to get back to his adventure, but Josie held firm. Through the window she saw Silas look up, catching sight of them. He smiled and waved, a simple gesture that still made her heart warm. The past months hadn't been without challenges. Silas's near-fatal accident had been followed by weeks of recovery, during which he'd chafed at his inability to work to provide. Josie had needed to step in, selling extra eggs and preserves in town to make ends meet. It had strained them both, testing the commitment they'd made to each other. Then there was the matter of their unusual situation. Despite their obvious devotion to each other and to Levi, whispers still followed them in town. Living in sin, some of the more judgmental residents called it. Josie had learned to hold her head high, to meet disapproving glances with a steady gaze. But it wore on her sometimes, the constant need to defend their family. Silas came in from the cold, stamping snow from his boots at the door. "Chickens are fed," he announced, unwinding the scarf from his neck. "And I fixed that loose board on the coop. Should keep the foxes out now." "Thank you," Josie said, handing Levi over to his eager arms. "I was thinking of baking bread today. We're almost out." "Sounds good," Silas replied, lifting Levi high above his head, making the baby squeal with delight. "Maybe those cinnamon rolls too? The ones you made for Thanksgiving?" Josie smiled. "Maybe, if you're good." Silas caught her around the waist with his free arm, pulling her close. "I'm always good," he murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. It was moments like these, simple, domestic, filled with easy affection, that still surprised Josie the most. After Tom died, she'd believed that part of her life was over, that love and family were things of the past. Yet here she was, baking bread for a man who looked at her like she was the sunrise, raising a child who had captured her heart completely. "Need to go into town today," Silas said as they ate breakfast. "Pick up a few things from the store, and Jim mentioned he might have a lead on some work for the spring, breaking horses for that new ranch over in Willow Creek." Josie nodded, though a small frown creased her brow. Willow Creek was a good day's ride away. It would mean Silas being gone overnight, maybe longer. "It's good money," he continued, reading her expression. "And it wouldn't be until April. Just something to think about." "Of course," Josie agreed. "We should save what we can, especially with the addition to the house." They'd begun work on expanding the small homestead, adding a proper bedroom for Levi, and reinforcing the roof and walls against the harsh mountain winters. Silas had proven handy with tools, and neighbors, impressed by his dedication and work ethic, had started to come around, offering help with the bigger jobs. "Want to come with me?" Silas asked, changing the subject. "You and Levi? We could have lunch at the hotel, make a day of it." The idea was tempting. Josie had been cooped up with the baby for days due to the snow. All right, she decided. It would be nice to get out for a bit. They bundled Levi up in layers of warm clothing, wrapping him in blankets for the ride into town. Silas had traded his saddle horse for a sturdy wagon with a covered back, much more practical for family trips. As they traveled, Josie held Levi close, pointing out the snow-covered trees, the occasional deer tracks crossing the road. Larkspur Ridge looked like a picture postcard, smoke rising from chimneys, holly wreaths decorating doors in preparation for Christmas. As they pulled up to the general store, Mrs. Peterson emerged, her face lighting up at the sight of them. "Well, if it isn't the Cades," she called, hurrying over to peek at Levi in Josie's arms. "My goodness, how he's grown," Josie didn't correct the assumption that they shared a last name. It was simpler this way, and in her heart they were already a family in every way that mattered. "He's getting into everything these days," she replied, smiling as Mrs. Peterson tickled Levi under his chin, "crawling faster than we can keep up." "That's how they are at this age," Mrs. Peterson said knowingly. "Emma's little James is the same, into every cupboard and drawer. Just wait till he starts walking." The easy conversation continued as they entered the store. Josie noticed with satisfaction that the whispers had diminished over time. Their presence in town had become, if not fully accepted, at least less remarkable. Silas loaded their purchases into the wagon, while Josie took Levi to the hotel for lunch as planned. The dining room was warm and inviting, decorated with pine boughs and red ribbons for the season. Sheriff Roberts was there, dining with Dr. Miller. Both men tipped their hats as Josie entered. "Mrs. Mercer," the sheriff greeted her. "And Young. Master Cade. Join us, won't you? Your man loading up at the store still?" "Yes, he'll be along shortly," Josie replied, taking the offered seat. She'd given up on correcting people about her name. In time, perhaps it would change officially, but for now she was still legally Josie Mercer. Widow Dr. Miller smiled at Levi, who was eyeing the doctor's soup with interest. "This young fellow is thriving, I see. A testament to good care." "He's a joy," Josie said simply. "We've been blessed." The conversation turned to town matters, the upcoming Christmas festival, plans for expanding the schoolhouse in the spring, the new families that had moved to the area following the expansion of the logging operation. Silas arrived, shaking, snow from his coat as he entered the dining room. He greeted the men with handshakes, taking the empty seat beside Josie. "Got everything we need," he reported, "and Jim confirms that horse-breaking job is ours if we want it. Good money, too, enough to finish the addition and put some aside." Sheriff Roberts nodded approvingly. "Heard about that. Thornton's affair. Man to work for. Demanding, but he pays well for quality work." Lunch progressed pleasantly, the conversation flowing easily among the adults, while Levi entertained himself with a wooden spoon provided by the waitress. As they finished their meal, Dr. Miller cleared his throat. "I hope you don't mind my asking," he said, looking between Silas and Josie, "but have you two given any thought to making your arrangement more official?" A slight tension fell over the table. Silas glanced at Josie, then back at the doctor. "We have," he said carefully. "But there are complications." "Such as?" Sheriff Roberts asked, direct as always. Silas hesitated, then spoke with quiet dignity. "As you know, Levi's mother passed away during his birth. What you may not know is that Lucy and I were never officially married. There was a ceremony of sorts, but no legal documentation." This was news to Josie. Silas had spoken of Lucy often, her kind heart, her love of singing, how her death had shattered him, but he'd never mentioned their marital status. "I see," Dr. Miller said, his expression thoughtful rather than judgmental. "And that presents an obstacle to marrying Josie." Silas nodded. "I've been concerned that without proof of Lucy's death or of our relationship, there might be legal questions. I wouldn't want to bring any trouble to Josie or Levi." Sheriff Roberts stroked his mustache thoughtfully. "Have you spoken to Judge Wilson about this? He's a reasonable man, might be able to advise you." "I haven't," Silas admitted. "Wasn't sure how to approach it." "I'd be happy to arrange a meeting," the sheriff offered. "Unofficially, of course, just to explore your options." The conversation moved on to other topics, but Josie's mind remained on what she'd learned. Later, as they drove home through the falling snow, she finally voiced the question that had been troubling her. "Why didn't you tell me about you and Lucy not being officially married?" Silas's hands tightened on the reins. "I was afraid," he admitted after a long moment. "Afraid you'd think less of me, that it would change how you felt." "You know me better than that," Josie said softly. "I do now," Silas agreed. "But when we first met, I wanted you to see me as honorable, as someone worthy of your trust." Josie considered this. "Were you and Lucy planning to marry properly?" "Yes," Silas said without hesitation. "We had a ceremony with her family present, what her people would consider a true marriage. But we hadn't filed the legal papers yet. Then she got sick during the pregnancy and everything happened so fast." His voice trailed off, old grief shadowing his face. Josie placed her hand on his arm in silent comfort. "It doesn't change anything for me," she assured him. "But I understand why you'd worry about the legal aspects." Silas nodded, his expression clearing somewhat. "I've been thinking about it more and more lately, about making things official between us. I just wanted to be sure there wouldn't be complications." They rode in thoughtful silence for a while, the only sound the crunch of snow beneath the wagon wheels and Levi's occasional babbling from where he sat wrapped in blankets on Josie's lap. "We should meet with Judge Wilson," Josie said finally. "Find out where we stand." Silas glanced at her, hope kindling in his eyes. "You're sure?" "I'm sure," she said firmly. "Whatever comes, we'll face it together." The following week, they left Levi with Mrs. Peterson and met with Judge Wilson in his office behind the courthouse. The judge, a kindly man with spectacles perched on his nose, listened attentively as Silas explained their situation. "I see," he said when Silas had finished, "and you have no documentation of Miss Lucy's death, no cemetery records." "She's buried on her family's land," Silas explained. "They keep to their own ways, don't much involve the town authorities." "Udge." Wilson nodded thoughtfully. "And where is her family now?" "Gone," Silas said. "After Lucy died, they moved on. I've tried to locate them, especially after Levi was taken, but without success." The judge removed his spectacles, cleaning them with a handkerchief as he considered. "The law requires certainty in these matters," he said finally. "But life is rarely certain, is it?" He replaced his glasses and leaned forward. "Here's what I suggest. We'll place a notice in newspapers in the surrounding counties requesting information about Lucy's family or any legal claim to the child. If nothing comes of it after 3 months, I believe we can proceed with both matters, legally establishing your paternity of the boy, and if you wish, a marriage ceremony for the two of you." Relief washed over Silas's face. "That sounds more than fair, Judge, thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Judge Wilson cautioned. "There's always the possibility that someone will come forward." "Are you prepared for that?" Silas and Josie exchanged glances. "We are," Josie answered for both of them. "Whatever happens, Levi's welfare comes first." The judge smiled approvingly. "Good answer, Mrs. Mercer. Now shall I arrange for those notices to be placed?" They left the courthouse with lighter hearts, though the prospect of waiting 3 more months felt daunting. As they collected Levi from Mrs. Peterson, who had spoiled him thoroughly with treats and attention, Silas seemed lost, in thought. "What's on your mind?" Josie asked as they headed home. "Just thinking about Lucy," he replied honestly, "about what she'd make of all this." Josie waited, giving him space to continue. "She was a good woman," Silas said softly. "Kind-hearted, always. Seeing the best in people, including me when I didn't deserve it." He glanced at Josie. "She'd like you, I think, and she'd be grateful that Levi has you in his life." The simple words meant more to Josie than any grand declaration could have. She'd never felt jealous of Lucy's place in Silas's heart. How could she, when that love had created Levi? But hearing him speak of her with such respect and include Josie in the same thought felt like a blessing. "I wish I could have known her," Josie said sincerely. Silas reached across the wagon seat, taking her hand in his. "In a way, you do. Through Levi. He has her smile, her curiosity, her way of looking at the world like it's full of wonders." Josie squeezed his hand, understanding what he was really saying. That love didn't have to be divided or diminished when shared. That there was room in their hearts for the memory of Lucy alongside the life they were building together. The weeks passed, winter gradually giving way to the first tentative signs of spring. The notices were placed in newspapers as Judge Wilson had promised, but as time went on, no one came forward with information about Lucy's family or claims on Levi. Life settled into a comfortable routine. Silas worked at the livery, occasionally, taking on additional jobs to save for the future. Josie tended the homestead, and Levi, who grew more adventurous by the day. The addition to the house was completed just as the snow began to melt, giving them much-needed space and a proper bedroom for Levi. In late March, just as the 3-month waiting period was nearing its end, a letter arrived. Sheriff Roberts brought it out to the homestead personally, his expression grave. "This came to the courthouse," he explained, handing the envelope to Silas. "Addressed to the father of Lucy Clearwater's child." Josie felt a chill run down her spine at the formal address. Clearwater. She'd never known Lucy's last name before. Silas opened the letter with steady hands, though Josie could see the tension in his shoulders. His eyes scanned the page, his expression shifting from apprehension to surprise, then to a kind of solemn relief. "It's from Lucy's grandmother," he said finally. "She saw one of the notices." He looked up at Sheriff Roberts. "She's not making a claim on Levi, she's giving her blessing." "Blessing?" Josie asked, confused. Silas handed her the letter. The handwriting was shaky but clear, the words simple and direct. "To the father of my great-grandson, I write to you with a heavy heart but a clear mind. Our family has suffered much, losing Lucy and then being forced to move on. I do not know if you remember me. We met only once at the ceremony where you pledged yourself to my granddaughter. Lucy loved you. She believed in you even when you doubted yourself. When news reached us that you had taken the child and were raising him with a good woman, I felt Lucy would approve. A child needs both mother and father, and since Lucy cannot be there, I'm grateful another has stepped into that role. By the customs of our people, you and Lucy were truly married. I have enclosed a letter stating as much, which may help with your legal matters. I also send a small token that belonged to Lucy, a necklace her mother gave her. Perhaps one day your son will give it to his bride. May you find peace and happiness in your new family. Lucy would want that above all. With respect, Mary Clearwater." Enclosed with the letter was a simple silver pendant on a chain and a more formal document declaring that by the customs of the Clearwater family, Silas Cade and Lucy Clearwater had been joined in marriage on June 12, 1869. Josie looked up from the letter, tears blurring her vision. "This is everything we needed," Sheriff Roberts finished for her. "Judge Wilson says this should satisfy the legal requirements. The waiting period is technically not over, but given the circumstances, he's willing to proceed whenever you're ready." After the sheriff left, Silas and Josie sat on the porch steps, the letter and pendant between them. Levi played nearby, fascinated by a butterfly that had landed on an early spring flower. "It feels like a sign," Josie said softly, "like Lucy's giving us her blessing." Silas nodded, picking up the pendant. The silver caught the sunlight, sending a brief flash across the yard. "I remember this. She wore it always, said it connected her to her ancestors." He looked at Josie, his eyes full of emotion. "I've been carrying so much guilt. About not being there when she died, about running afterward, about not being the man she thought I was." "You are that man now," Josie said, taking his hand. "The man who rode through a storm to find his son, who walked miles with a broken arm to get back to his family, who works hard every day to build a good life for us." Silas's fingers tightened around hers. "Because of you," he said. "You made me believe I could be that man." "No," Josie shook her head. "You always were. You just needed to find your way back to yourself." They sat in companionable silence, watching Levi's delighted exploration of the world around him. Finally, Silas spoke again. "Judge Wilson says we can proceed whenever we're ready," he repeated the sheriff's words. "So Josie Mercer, when would you like to become Josie Cade?" Her heart swelled at the simple proposal. No grand gestures, no elaborate speeches, just an honest question from a man who had become the center of her world. "Soon," she answered, smiling. "Very soon." They were married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the church. Pastor Williams officiated, his genuine pleasure in joining them evident in his warm smile. The small sanctuary was filled with well-wishers, friends and neighbors who had come to respect the unconventional family. Mrs. Peterson had organized a modest reception at the hotel, complete with a cake baked by her daughter Emma. Sheriff Roberts stood as Silas's best man, while Emma held baby Levi during the ceremony, the child dressed in his finest clothes for the occasion. As Josie spoke her vows, she felt a sense of rightness settle over her. This wasn't the life she had imagined for herself. It was better, richer, more meaningful than anything she could have planned. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Pastor Williams declared. "What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." Silas kissed her then, a kiss full of promise and joy. The gathered crowd applauded, genuine happiness in their response. Whatever whispers had once followed them through town had been silenced by the evident love and commitment they shared. At the reception, Dr. Miller raised a glass in toast. "To Silas and Josie Cade," he said, "and to young Levi who brought them together. May your home always be as warm as your hearts." Later, as they danced to the music provided by the town's small band, Silas held Josie close. "Happy, Mrs. Cade?" he murmured against her ear. "Very," she replied, leaning into his embrace, "though I think there's someone who might be even happier than me." They both looked to where Levi sat on Sheriff Roberts's knee, clapping his hands in delight at the music and attention. The boy who had arrived on Josie's doorstep in a storm, scared and abandoned, now flourished in the love that surrounded him. "He has your smile," Silas observed. "Have you noticed that? When he laughs, he looks just like you." Josie felt tears prick her eyes at the simple observation. She wasn't Levi's mother by birth, but in all the ways that mattered, she had become his mother. "In truth, I love him so much," she whispered, "as if he were my own." "He is your own," Silas assured her. "Blood isn't the only thing that makes a family." The celebration continued into the evening, but eventually it was time to head home. They had decided against a traditional honeymoon. Their life together had already begun months ago, and Levi was too young to be left with others for longs. They drove home under a canopy of stars, Levi sleeping peacefully between them. Josie felt a contentment she had never known before. The homestead came into view, lanterns lit in welcome by neighbors who had slipped away early to prepare this surprise. "Welcome home, Mrs. Cade," Silas said as he helped her down from the wagon, Levi cradled in his arms. "Home," Josie repeated, looking at the small house that had seen so much change in the past months. "I liked the sound of that. Inside, everything was just as they had left it, yet somehow different. Now it was truly theirs, a home they shared as husband and wife, as a family bound by law as well as love. They put Levi to bed in his new room, the child so tired from the day's excitement that he barely stirred as they tucked him in. Standing together over his crib, they watched him sleep for a long moment. "I never thought I'd have this," Silas admitted quietly. "After Lucy died, I thought that chance was gone forever." "I felt the same after Tom," Josie replied. "Like that part of life was closed to me." Silas turned to her, taking both her hands in his. "Thank you," he said simply, "for opening your door that night, for giving us shelter from the storm, for loving us both when we needed it most." Josie smiled, her heart so full she thought it might burst. "The storm brought you to me," she said, "but you're the ones who stayed." Outside, spring rain began to fall, gentle and life-giving. But inside their home, all was warmth and security and love, the kind of love that builds slowly and surely, weathering whatever storms may come. As Silas drew her close, Josie knew with absolute certainty that this was where she belonged, with this man who had fought his way back to his son, who had overcome his fears to love again, with this child who had brought them together and made them a family. The storm that brought them three had changed everything, and for that, Josie would be forever grateful. "I love you, Silas Cade," she whispered against his lips. "And I love you, Josie Cade," he replied, sealing the words with a kiss. "Forever and always." In the room next door, Levi slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge, even at his young age, that he was home, that he was loved, that the family the storm had brought together would weather whatever life might bring, standing strong together through all the seasons to come. The end.